This week's episode is brought to you by Catums and Aaron Oberlin. Thank you, Catums and Aaron Oberlin. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that we here at The Whole Rabbit get to keep our prized collection of brain-stimulating carrots growing at maximum capacity. Using bone meal we source directly from the skeletons of our enemies who frequently travel here from the 7th dimension where human emotions are bartered like currency in an economy of pain. If you'd like to assist The Whole Rabbit, farming operations, or just hear the second half of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your very spooky donation of just $5 will not only get you the second half of this episode, nay, you'll get the skeleton key to our entire library of extended episodes. Going back so far, I'm reasonably certain it would fill a number of work shifts or road trips or journeys through the Duat with their voluminous content. Some have told me it's almost as good as reading books. Wow. But that's not all. When you subscribe, even at our lowest tier, I'll send you a 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, which is the best Baphomet. And if that wasn't enough, you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server where we talk about all the stuff you should probably avoid discussing during the holidays, like spagyrics, how to communicate with angels using a toothbrush, Nelson Mandela's nose hair, and sentient black goo, sometimes all at once. In this week's episode, we continue onward to part 4 of the life and times of Edgar Cayce, one of the world's most well-known psychics and unwitting messenger of the New Age. In this colorful section of Edgar Cayce's life, the magnificent medium of Kentucky tries his hand in the oil business, using his clairvoyance to strike black gold in the desolate hills of northern Texas. Along the way, Edgar would experiment for the first time with a Ouija board, with spectacular results, write a script for a Hollywood movie, seriously, and even did top secret work with the US government. In the extended show, Cayce begins doing mediumship full-time and encounters none other than Harry Houdini and other prominent debunkers who failed to expose him. At his lowest point, desperate for cash, Cayce was tempted by the elite to sell his soul and begins doing work for a wealthy spiritualist who began detailed dialogue with Cayce during trance about the occult truths of our world. You know, the same questions that we would ask him if we could. And these questions would then initiate Edgar's journey on his path of becoming the sleeping prophet. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Okay.
What do you call oil that doesn't work?
What?
Lubricant.
Right there.
I had a joke about crude oil, but I thought I could use some refinement.
It was probably a little too crude, right?
What's the scariest kind of oil?
What?
A gargoyle. I saw a 2,000-year-old stain. It was from ancient Greece.
That's the best one. I take it this episode has a lot to do with oil.
Well, you know, I was at the library and I asked where I could find a book on greases and oils, lubricants. The librarian suggested I try the non-friction section. And then I was thinking about almond oil. It's made by crushing almonds. Peanut oil is made by crushing peanuts. Coconut oil is made by crushing coconuts. I'm starting to wonder where Puff Daddy got all that baby oil.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. That's spooky. That is some spooky shit right there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just yell facts in your general direction at 1,000 miles per hour about how to conjure bird-faced demons from a crusty PDF we found buried in a federal employee's blackmail folder on their kid's notebook computer. Nay, we also sometimes kick off our shoes and cozy up next to the fire in our cozy farmhouse and tell the tale of the real-life Forrest Gump of the Aquarian Age. Because this week, we're discussing Edgar Cayce's life, part 4, the There Will Be Blood section. Daniel Day-Lewis shows up. There's lots of crying and discordant string music and much dread. So much dread. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, also known as Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the wondrous werewolf of the Waffle House, Mari Sama.
Yeah, what you want, honey?
The Solar Sultan with the psychedelic cinnamon bun, Malachor 5.
They said an old guitar is all he can afford.
And the wizened weaver of whimsical weirdness, Hecka Astra.
Hello.
I really feel like they could make Edgar Cayce's life into a Netflix series.
Yeah, they ought to just use our episodes and do some film editing on top of it.
I mean, we could just wait for AI to do it for us.
Ugh.
Well, I'm sure if I keep researching, I'm going to discover that it was in fact Edgar Cayce who invented AI in his trance state. I mean, really, I'm starting to think Spielberg needs to get his ass in gear and make a film. I mean, if people are going to sit all the way through a movie about, what, Oppenheimer? With the Batman kid? You know who needs to play Edgar Cayce? Daniel Craig. We'll just make David Wilcock do it. So when we last left Edgar Cayce, he had blown up and become internationally famous with the help of Dr. Wesley Ketchum, who had started this domino effect by writing papers about Casey's ability and then lecturing about them in the medical community. The big problem was that Dr. Ketchum had described Edgar in the papers as an illiterate freak, and although he had put on a good front, Edgar eventually figured out that Ketchum had been abusing his ability to cheat at horse races, all under the pretense of helping patients, who, as a consequence, then went untreated. Heartbroken and humiliated, Edgar would, like he had before, just up and walk away from everything in Hopkinsville. Like when he found out Ketchum was using his ability just to make money, he was like, bye, Felicia! I'm gonna go where people appreciate me! So with Gertrude still recovering at home from tuberculosis, Edgar decided it would be wise to set up shop in Selma, Alabama, the fastest growing city in the state. Edgar picked up a gig with the prestigious H.P. Tressler Company to set up a new branch photography studio in town. Edgar chose 21.5 Broad Street, located in the middle of the business district, replete with a large skylight and foot traffic from the nearby riverbanks, a popular hangout spot for people to cool their feet during the midday heat. Downstairs was Coffin Coleman's drugstore, and the third story, where the Cayce family would soon live together, was a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the Alabama River. At first, Gertrude was concerned that a busy place like Selma would have a negative effect on Edgar. Like numerous times before, though, Edgar insulated himself with a gamut of activities for the First Christian Church on the corner of Selma and Franklin Street, and that pretty much consumed his life.
It's like, oh boy, I got all these problems back that old town. First place you go is a Christian church. Pretty absurd.
That's like his Facebook. That's like his Instagram. Like, he goes to church and then everybody knows him because he knows everything about the Bible and he's super nice to everybody.
Aw, here we go again.
And just like before, he's doing outreach work, he's doing charity, and they make him a deacon. So if this were an RPG, Edgar Cayce would be a priest class. He'd be a cleric. Edgar Cayce would make a pretty good D&D character, actually.
Oh, yeah. OP as fuck.
He's only useful when he's sleeping,
Yeah.
Oh.
and you can only do how many rests in before everybody
That's
has to take
actually a
long-
great point.
It's like, well, your powers only work when we're doing the long rest, buddy. You're kind of useless.
You know what's really funny is that I was recently playing Pokemon and I have an Alakazam that I'm trying to train up. And like 2 of its moves only work when it's sleeping.
Sweet.
And they're like the best moves it has. But I have no move to put him to sleep. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of useless.
You gotta feed him some narco berries. Now, just like last time, Edgar had a Bible study class, although this time it was in room 7, and it became so damn popular between Catholics, Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, Episcopalians, just all under one roof that they even created a magazine for it called The Sevenette. That is like how popular his Bible class was. And the people in this Bible class were like the true believers. Many of them actually went on to become missionaries in Mexico, Japan, India, and we know because Edgar kept in contact with them all those years. So as much as you want to think of Edgar Cayce as helping launch the New Age movement, man, he sent Christians all over the world to spread the word of the gospel. So,
That's wild.
right? You wouldn't think that.
Maybe the whole rabbit needs missionaries going across the world.
Who says we don't? They're just secret and embedded in your cupboards under the stairs. Now, it wouldn't be until April 1912 that Edgar would even attempt to do another trance reading. It was getting late in the month, though, and rent was due. It had been raining for 2 weeks straight, and there was no business. Edgar was in the middle of saying his prayers when a damp old lady walked into the store. Her bonnet was soaked and sticking to the side of her face. She wanted an enlargement of a picture that her son had sent her, but the only money she had was a check that her son had included in the letter.
This is from my boy. I had been to everyone in town, but nobody will cash it.
Wanting to help, but also desperate to pay the rent, Edgar went to the local bank and talked to the reluctant bank manager into cashing the strange out-of-state check. Apparently, the manager had already seen it a handful of times that day and had rejected it each time. So after making the sale and getting the rent paid, the woman confided that she had a daughter who was suffering from infantile paralysis. The woman eventually asked for a reading, which induced Edgar to assemble his church friends to help conduct it. Rather than treat him as a freak, Edgar was seen more like a hero. And just like that, Edgar was back to doing readings again, although this time in Selma, Alabama. It would be a year and a half later that Edgar would finally meet a trustworthy longtime partner, one in fact that had been foretold in his readings. In December of 1913, Edgar was contacted by Amanda Faye Delaney, the wife of a wealthy owner of a Kentucky lumber company who had been horribly crippled in a car accident. On his way to Lexington, Edgar stopped in Hopkinsville to pick up Dr. Blackburn, who was going to conduct the reading. But then all of a sudden, Dr. Blackburn canceled because he had a last-minute emergency surgery. When Edgar arrived, he described Miss Delaney was in the most pitiful condition he had ever seen someone. She had to be wheeled in on a stretcher, and she had swollen up like a balloon, too weak to lift her arms. Even the gentle touch of a soft blanket was said to be agony to her. The important part of this story is that Dr. Blackburn was originally intended to conduct the reading, but when he failed to tag along, the duty fell to Mr. Delaney, who declined on the grounds that he was a Roman Catholic and he was forbade upon calling on spirits. His solution? Mr. Delaney remarked that he had a Jewish neighbor who might be willing to do it. This young, handsome Jewish college student eagerly obliged and conducted the trance reading from Edgar's little black user manual.
Is that why Sacha Baron Cohen is in the notes?
I needed a picture of a young, handsome Jewish man, so that's what I was imagining. That's what Dave Kahn looks like in my head in this story. Now, it must have gone well, because Edgar would be invited back to Lexington time and time again to oversee Miss Delaney's full recovery. But it would be his connection with Dave Kahn that would last decades and endure through some incredible adventures. Edgar even suspected as much, because an earlier reading had informed him that a Jewish man was destined to become an integral part of his spiritual work. By the end, Kahn officiated close to a third of all of Edgar's readings he ever did. Edgar and David's mom, known simply as Mother Kahn, also got along famously, as she too was possessed of some psychic ability. David's father, Solomon, on the other hand, well, he was a biblical scholar and an ardent student of the Talmud, which meant he eyed Edgar with a grave suspicion. Early on, Solomon would urge David to remember that Saul had once conjured Samael through a witch doctor, and he had paid a steep price for doing so. Disturbing spirits of the dead was blasphemous after all. Solomon apparently listened to his son when David urged his father that Edgar, well, he wasn't contacting an angel of wrath or demons or spirits of the dead, he was conjuring his higher self. That was apparently enough to sell him. In fact, it would not be long before the Kahn family themselves made use of Edgar's trance readings. And so, when Edgar eventually encounters the Jewish faith, just like the Christian one, they have measures in place that are like, oh no, we don't mess with you spirit medium channel healers.
Right, I guess because we're supposed to ignore the powers.
Yeah, and it's a known phenomena, and they just want to, like, we don't do it, we do something else. So the first reading that Cayce did for the Kahns was David's brother Leon, who'd suffered from severe epilepsy, but he subsequently died after the reading because no doctor could be found to carry out the recommended treatment. So when David's sister, Eleanor, became deadly ill with scarlet fever, Edgar's trance readings were followed to the letter, and she recovered. But the biggest development for Cayce at this time was that David had, presumably, figured out a palatable way for Edgar to do readings for financial gain without violating his moral principles. So throughout 1914 and 1915, Edgar did a number of Kahn family readings aimed at improving the Kahn family grocery business. These originally began with a single basic question: how do we, the Kahn family, improve business? This would be the first of nearly 800 business readings, as Cayce would come to call them. Kahn would receive the first. In trance, Edgar pointed out that the schools he sold his cans to spent a considerable amount of time and effort opening these cans by hand each and every day. And so, to make it all the easier, the Kahn family should buy gallon-sized cans instead of so many numerous small ones. David had never even heard of gallon-sized cans, and when he went to the canning factory, he asked specifically for them. It turned out to be a huge boon to business. Kahn would also receive the first readings regarding career guidance, which Cayce came to refer to as mental and spiritual readings. In Kahn's case, he informed him that he would soon leave the flock and go into uniform, which seemed at first equally ridiculous as it was unlikely. Kahn, after all, did not come from a family of police or firemen. Although they did not know it yet, this was the first hint that a war to end all wars would soon subsume the whole of Europe. And through Kahn, Edgar would end up getting involved. Maybe much more than mainstream history would have us believe. For now, though, Edgar's business readings opened up his life to a whole new set of adventures back in the States. For example, when Edgar did a reading for Edwin Williamson, a railroad man, it was under the pretext of helping him jumpstart his dream of being a Hollywood writer, requesting him help in developing plot points for a new script. Edgar thought it sounded like a fun experiment. And besides, Edgar and Edwin's kids were already friends. They used to play motion pictures together. It was like their favorite game. So like his kid, Edwin was also one to make a bit of make-believe. He told Carl Laemmle, head of Universal Pictures, that he was the spiritual advisor or spiritual business manager of the great Edgar Cayce, the great and magnificent sidekick. Edwin was going to, in classic Hollywood fashion, make a spectacle of the entire thing. A prompt for what kind of story was wanted, not unlike the input you'd give to ChatGPT or Grok, was placed on a single piece of paper face down at the center of the Churchill's New York nightclub, where the press party was taking place. Edgar would go into trance over in Alabama, and shortly after, he wired a 450-word script synopsis to the New York party. Sadly, the transcript was lost, but the press thought it was absolutely brilliant.
His psychic self, traveling more than 1,200 miles on a space-annihilating train of thought. The first psycho-scenario writer of record transmitted from Selma, Alabama to New York. A 5-reel scenario for Miss Violet Missero.
The event was considered a huge success, and although the movie was never made, it got Edwin's foot in the door where he did find success. Before disembarking for Hollywood, though, Edwin would also convince Edgar to try his hand at the Ouija board, if only just once. You know, for the sake of science. Of all people, Gertrude played Edgar's partner holding on to the planchette. Hugh Lynn was also sitting in the room and recounts what he saw.
I never saw a piece of wood cavort like that thing did. It was exactly like there was a line of unseen people standing up, and they could only have 3 seconds or 3 minutes to give their little speech, and the next one would come on.
As is typical with potent experiences of the Ouija board, the messages which came through seemed to be possessed of knowledge about deceased people who they earnestly claimed to be. Without knowing more about the finer points of the operation itself, it would be hard to judge the authenticity of who Edgar was actually talking to, or if he was talking to a disembodied spirit of, some other origin. But there is reason to believe at least one of the interactions was genuine. One voice claimed to be of a teenager in Ohio who was said to have run away from home. Through the planchette, he told Edgar that he had actually drowned, and he told him where his family could find the body. When Edgar did contact the family, they were able to locate their son's body, submerged in cotton barbed wire at exactly the spot where Edgar told them they could find him. All those years, they had thought he'd just run away. Edgar would later reflect on the use of such methods like the Ouija board.
A lot of good has come through Ouija boards and the automatic writing, but a lot of people have gotten disturbed through it too. The balance is on the negative side.
So, Edgar's opinion of the Ouija board is very similar to what we found on the show, which is they work damn well, but they really deserve a more in-depth instruction manual. Like, you probably want to pray or you want to banish. You want to make sure you know who you're talking to. And he's warning you, if you just leave an open door, you might get Zaza. Or, that's the demon of the...
Zozo.
Yeah,
Zozo. I tend to agree with Edgar Cayce's summary of it.
Yeah, it's like these methods have actually no filter. And there's also no way to verify, like, the information coming through is truthful or not. You're just basically opening up a floodgate of psychic connection, and you're not sure in which direction or who specifically or what is the purpose of it.
Yes, and that's why Ouija boards are sometimes considered dangerous. Kind of like just throwing yourself online without a firewall, just letting anything come in your front door.
I mean,
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
There's very few methods of interacting with a spirit or some entity, right? That's seemingly formless. There's very few ways to communicate with it so that some sort of physical thing is happening and you know exactly what it's saying. There's nothing better than actually having the whole alphabet of the language you're speaking to it in and giving it like a little cursor on a desktop to click the letters. That's pretty hard proof, and it's about as simple as putting your alphabet down on some slab, and then you put a rock there and you talk to the spirit, and it's like, move the rock to the letter that you are trying to tell me.
Yeah.
That's, even if it is the wind blowing it and you don't know that, that's still a pretty fucking valid experience to tell you something's communicating to you.
Correct, but when I say not verifiable, I don't mean that it's not happening. I mean that any spirit or thing can come and say it can lie to you is what I mean. Because there's instances we just mentioned Zozo, entities can come through these methods, and same thing with automatic writing, but there's no way it'll tell you, oh, I'm your long lost dead great grandfather, but it may not be that actual spirit, right? There's
Absolutely.
no way to filter that out.
You know me.
There's a lot of trickster spirits that you can end up contacting instead of who you're actually trying to contact. I think it makes a lot more sense to contact your higher self or HDA or however you want to call it.
Right.
And you're going to get more truthful information that way too.
Correct. That's your filter there. And because they can actually move around and see things on the other side and then go get, the person or the vision that you need to see that you're requesting.
I guess to restate what I'm saying a little more clearly is that they got some superpowered wizard guy who's sometimes in contact with his HGA in front of a Ouija board. you know, and the way that the Ouija board is, it's a little more modern. It's very easy for some spirit to come and contact you, it seems. So they're kind of, you know, playing with the, you know, some CERN tech in terms of the occult world or Ouija board magic. It's like you got this powerful dude who's able to do this without this, starting to make money and the Ouija board.
I think that speaks volumes with what you just said, Malachor, because it's like if this guy has this ability and he still gives the Ouija boards like they're more negative effects than positive benefits, I think that says something.
Well, as we'll figure out, this is not how Edgar Cayce normally functions. He relies on contacting what we would consider his holy guardian angel. He doesn't normally talk directly with the dead, and he normally doesn't even remember when he goes into trance. He certainly does remember and recall what happens when he's using the Ouija board. I also thought it was interesting he mentioned automatic writing, because that's a much more accessible method than channeling if you want to talk directly to your subconscious mind. If you just put your hand down on the paper and move it without thinking, you're going to get content from your subconscious mind, and it's used in chaos magic. I think it's interesting that he mentions that it also can be dangerous. Now, at this time, another big door which opened was having Gertrude help with the readings. After so many years of rejecting them, she had finally come around and even begun officiating sessions. The tipping point had come around this time in Selma, when Hugh Lynn accidentally dropped a lit match into a box of flash powder. The explosive dust used in flashbulbs at the time. The resulting explosion had left the 6-year-old blind, burnt, and screaming in horror. The kicking and screaming continued all the way to the doctor, but when the attending physician remarked they would have to remove Hugh Lynn's right eye, he suddenly became very quiet, propped himself up on one arm, and said, "My daddy, when he's asleep, is the best doctor in the world. He'll tell you what to do." Until then, Gertrude and Edgar were too freaked out to have even considered it yet. At home, Gertrude would conduct the trance session, which had a palpable sense of power and purpose to it, described as if the room was full of electricity. Gertrude and Edgar were a power couple in this capacity, and it had taken this tragedy with their child to realize it. In trance, Edgar's source pointed out that the doctors had done a bang-up job, and they merely needed to add some tannic acid to the eye drops they had already prescribed. But the doctors thought that was insane. Gertrude saw no harm, though, because the doctors had already said that Hugh Lynn's sight would be ruined either way. So they figured, why not put the tannic acid in the eye drops? So Hugh Lynn spent the next 2 weeks with his eyes bathing in the solution, bandaged in a dark room. But eventually, a layer of white burned flesh sloughed off, and Hugh Lynn could suddenly see again. For all his trouble, Hugh Lynn got off easy, just needed a pair of glasses for the rest of his life.
Whoa. And like, essentially, that's how they do eye surgery. They'll just shave off the layer of your cornea and it'll heal correctly again and you can see. So he basically knew to do that.
Whoa, is that actually how it works?
Well,
LASIK.
yeah, they do it with lasers now, but like,
Yeah, LASIK.
I think essentially what he did was made a diluted solution that burned the outer layer of the cornea, and then that way it could heal new tissue below it.
Interesting.
I had a cornea burn once. I was at my very first job when I was 16 years old, and I spilled an industrial dishwashing liquid called chemical L4 in my eye.
Ugh.
Like I was moving a bucket, and it's like a concentrated chemical, and it burned my cornea. And when I went to the hospital, they had like a weird suction cup thing that they stick on your eyeball that's like hooked up to an IV bag.
Woo.
And it just like force flushes some kind of solution on your eyeball.
To probably stop the reaction, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, working in shops, I've had to see that in action. And it's like, oh, that's what you do with the tube thingy.
Well, I was using the first aid eye flush thing, and it wasn't good enough. It was a really like it fucking burned. So I got it all over and in my eye. So that whatever they put on my eye was different than just a saline solution.
Right. As far as lasers, like zapping the top layers of your eyeball off, I've had to drive a couple friends home after they get the surgery because they drive themselves there, and they're like, "Hey man, can you drive my car back?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there, dude." And they look like a Marvel villain with under experiments or something because they're all wrapped up. I'm like, "Oh shit, it's fucking Xavier," you know.
So Maury brings up a good point. This is something we were speculating about. Are these treatments just hocus pocus, or is there some underlying scientific reason that the treatments work. And it looks more and more like there's actual science that's being done. It's just for some reason, Casey knows about it in his trance state and he doesn't when he's not.
Yeah, like they didn't have lasers available to them at that point in time. So the source just knew that the closest way to get that end product is with this specific thing.
Exactly. Like it is a future technology, just like how he's channeling schematics for building these machines that were cited in his readings. It's like we may not have the tools to do it, but there's like probably a basic equivalent that they had access to at this time that he would prescribe.
It's almost like the source automatically dumbs it down so that it can be applicable in that specific era.
So to give a little bit of my 2 cents here on how I feel about Casey and also continue this discussion a little bit, it's very interesting to me that there's a lot of faith involved in his healing experiments or tasks, his jobs, right? There's a lot of faith involved. But ultimately, I think a lot of the healing itself is done through scientific method and modern scientific insight that might be dormant in the subconscious of a smart dude who's just able to go into a trance state and then bring that information out, but in his waking mind has no clue that that information even exists. I just find it very conflicting to call these things miracles, at least 100%, when it's obvious that sometimes it seems it's just somebody got smart and applied their thoughts to it.
Right. That's the important part, at least for me, because I think if you are possessed of all the medical knowledge in the whole universe, but you have no empathy and you have no intuition, you're still not going to be as effective as you could be. And this is almost like an experiment where, what if we just cranked the intuition factor all the way up to 100? You know, in an ideal case, you would really want a trained medical professional that is also trained in trusting their intuition and knowing how to safely check and double check their intuition, like, oh, or let's say you do have a psychic on your team, you'd have a doctor that would be able to confirm or deny if that treatment would be safe. I don't know.
There should be checks and balances in every party. It's like you shoot the arrows, I go and stand in front of the goblin, we win.
Yes.
If we do it any other way, it's not going to work.
Just like with remote viewing. But hey, that's going to come up. Just wait. So now Gertrude, she would also conduct readings requested by David Kahn when he was both at home and overseas in uniform. For those unawares, World War I was especially gnarly, and it proved in David's advantage to have Edgar at his beck and call to advise him in the notoriously punishing game of roulette one plays when navigating a career in the military, especially during wartime. And one particularly colorful example. Edgar's source had Dave, during the entry of the United States into the war, apply to a training camp in New York, which was set to open on May 15th. This, the reading had shown, would prove to be the most favorable course of action when Kahn reported to the commanding officer at Governor's Island in New York, saying that he had been sent to inquire about a commission. He was summarily chewed out for being possessed of classified information that had yet been unreleased. Quick on his feet, Dave made up some story about having heard about it through the grapevine, and this purportedly was enough to calm the officer down.
In a more security-minded age, I might have spent the next few days undergoing interrogations and possible arrest, Kahn later said. Moreover, I could hardly tell the commanding officer the real truth without probably compromising myself as a possible army officer material.
Kahn would eventually grow bolder, however. When he was eventually informed that he was soon to be shipped overseas into the meat grinder, he asked Cayce for some advice and a prediction. In trance, Cayce informed Kahn that his division would soon be merged with the troops on the Mexican border, and that he would be given a choice between attending his current general as an aide in Virginia, or going with the newly formed division under a different general, and that he should choose the second option. For some silly reason or another, Kahn decided he would share these revelations as some sort of prophecy to his commanding officer, who in short order proceeded to furnish documentation that proved his detailed prediction was impossible. The next day, orders came down from above which quickly reversed the situation, and, as it unfolded, Kahn's commanding officer wanted to know how he had attained this information, and that the decision Kahn had prophesied to make had come true. Kahn spilled the beans and explained that it was his buddy Edgar Cayce back home who was profoundly psychic. As instructed, Kahn turned down the offer to attend the general for training in Virginia, and he deployed with his new division instead.
You will go with honor and you'll return with honor. You'll have many narrow escapes, but you'll never have an accident. You will come back in good health. You will move with the division and you will be successful.
If leaking classified information to his plucky officer friend had not put him on the map yet, Edgar Cayce also kept correspondences with Bible class students that he had taught throughout the many years, some of whom were in need of great spiritual insight and hungry for prophecy. One of these readings was for the wife of an American consul general stationed in Italy. Edgar was able to find the woman in trance immediately, but it also had the unintended side effect of making the voice give the reading in Italian, which sent the team back home in Alabama seeking a local fruit vendor they knew that spoke Italian to help translate. The problem was, this Italian fruit vendor didn't really know the Sicilian dialect, so he translated what he could. At some point, though, Gertrude figured out that she could just command the voice to switch back to English.
Oh,
That's so crazy.
I think they're tripping.
Okay, who flipped the Italian switch again?
He's just tucking with his hands. They're missing all these words.
Sign language button is on.
I'm just now seeing Tony Soprano
It's too bad they don't have a telethon for face-itis, huh? They found a cure yet?
in Alabama.
We put him under and he just keeps on asking for gabagool.
He's speaking in tongues, I tells you.
I mean, isn't that one of the traits of possession is like, oh, this person is talking in a language I know they don't know.
Yeah, and also split personalities. Like another personality can only speak one language and the other will speak another language. Interesting stuff.
I mean, this is one of those things where, in theory, he could be around enough doctors or have read enough books to learn medicine in his subconscious, but like Italian? Nah, man, that's demons or spirits or something.
Them Catholics.
Exactly. They know. Now get this. It wasn't long after this whole thing with the Italian that Edgar Cayce received a summons to Washington, D.C., which he admitted was top secret. He talks about it in his memoirs.
Oh, did they invite him to the coup?
I mean...
We're just, gonna nonchalantly use psychic abilities.
Woodrow Wilson was president, so...
Oh, he's cool. I like Woodrow Wilson.
I mean, this was back when, the Democrats and the Ku Klux Klan were like the same thing, but, that was a long time ago.
100 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe.
More. A little more than that.
Maybe that was a long time ago.
So anyway...
So he wrote in his memoirs, I was called to Washington to give information for one high in authority. This, I am sure, must have been at least interesting, as I was called a year or so later for the same purpose.
So this means, as far back as Woodrow Wilson, the United States government and military apparatus was wise to the efficacy and utility of psychic ability in warfare, possibly even diplomacy. In my opinion, this is an all-important piece of the puzzle in terms of understanding the legacy of psychic warfare in American history. The way the story is always told is that the CIA had just merely caught wind of the Russians weaponizing psychics and started their own remote viewing program based purely on hearsay. In reality, they had history of at least one good old boy from Kentucky capable of such feats. At least that's my working theory now. To make this even more compelling, it would not be the last time Cayce would be summoned to Washington, D.C. At least one visit was speculated to be concerned with Woodrow Wilson's health, which had declined rapidly near the end of his term. It was also possible the readings were concerned with the ill-fated League of Nations, which Edgar's source claimed was the only hope for preventing an even worse war from erupting just a short while later, which is exactly what happened.
Right. It was like the UN mark, patch 0.01.
Yes, it was beta test for the UN.
Yeah, alpha testing, something.
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. They weren't at Sigma.
You know that Ho Chi Minh was at the Treaty of Versailles?
Yes.
He was like, you should make Vietnam independent. We don't want to be like a French colony. And they're like, you just shut up. That's how far back that goes.
Just watch Apocalypse Now, the full extended director's uncircumcised cut.
I want to see the newest one still. We'll do that.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
It's a long cut. It's probably okay. I just think Redux is probably the definitive one. I'm going to keep saying it so everyone knows what I think. Okay, moving on. Now, in terms of conspiracy fodder, just like Malcor was implying, I don't think it gets much better than the Democratic Party using a psychic to help campaign for the creation of a global governing body that would one day be realized at the United Nations. Right? That's like every conspiracy theorist would probably want to know this. I never hear anyone talk about it. So
I don't want to talk about it. I would go on a whole political wheel. Don't take me there.
One world government. Edgar Cayce. Think about it.
Well, it's because the terms of this alliance, it wasn't a one world government. It was actually done the right way, but nobody was down because it wasn't a one world government.
Oh, for the plot thickens.
Yeah. Woodrow Wilson's my favorite president, honestly.
You can't like Woodrow Wilson because he said that the Birth of a Nation movie was good, and the Birth of the Nation movie had racist stuff in it.
People be racist.
Woodrow B. Wilson. Was his middle name B? I don't think so. I just want to say that.
Sorry.
Okay, now get this. Edgar's biography mentions there was an appearance of an unnamed government agent who would visit with Cayce like every now and then, but he also did readings shortly before his death in Virginia Beach in 1944. So he had like a regular secret government visitor. And then Edgar Cayce's secretary, she would even admit there were times times that she would put calls through to Edgar Cayce from Harry S. Truman. I'm too excited. That's the guy who dropped the nuclear bomb, you know? He was the first U.S. president to not have a college education. I don't know what that has to do with anything. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this was such a tantalizing detail that I feel completely justified speculating that Edgar Cayce was, starting at this time, recruited as a psychic spy for the United States government and served in this capacity for the rest of his life. Hypothetically speaking, just as a thought experiment, if Edgar Cayce, let's say he had been used as an asset for the Manhattan Project, would Edgar Cayce even know? No, he wouldn't.
I think the source would know, though.
But the source also believed in personal property and secrets. So it'd be like, hey, so what was that reading about you did for the US government? The source would be like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Just don't visit Japan anytime soon.
I wonder if this is why Valve named it Source Engine.
Edgar Cayce created it in trance long ago.
Oh, man.
Now, this is one reason I feel passionate about doing this show and sifting through all the things we do, because if you took all the plot points we've explored from the real world during this time period, and you put it all together in one story, which in reality it is, it would resemble the plotline of a science fiction anime or a Star Wars film, and I love it. It's got psychics running around.
Yeah, people say today information and all this interesting stuff is happening so fast and all the time. Oh, I can't keep up with it. Just imagine yourself back then.
It felt a lot like that back then because everything was advancing so quickly.
I mean, the electricity just boom.
So it seemed that Edgar Cayce's ability would become even stronger when he was teamed up with Gertrude. He'd even begun to answer questions that were still on his way to him via written correspondence. It's like full computer mode. So when Khan was finally allowed to come back stateside, he was bursting with ideas regarding the creation of a new psychic partnership with Cayce. Of course, Cayce was a little reluctant to make a business out of his trance readings as it had gone poorly in the past. Khan, although ambitious as hell, was quick to point out that so far there had been no ill effects from the business readings that he had done with Cayce. And there was no reason they couldn't come up with a business plan in trance as long as it abided by all the ethical considerations, if you will. Now, during one brainstorming session, Edgar presented an offer he had received from Day Matt Thrash, a Texas oil man who had requested of him that Cayce go into trance to help him locate oil underground. Edgar probably would have ignored the request if Khan had not helped him reason through it. To Khan, prospecting for oil was not like cheating at horse races or looking for buried treasure where the seeker didn't actually own the property or own the treasure. No. This oil was rightfully owned by the people who owned the land, and this was their property. This, he explained, was not too different from Grandpa Tom Cayce using a branch to douse for water. This proved to be an effective argument, and Cayce agreed to help Thrash. Thrash was drilling for oil in Desdemona, the oil capital of northern Texas at the time. Unlike his neighbors, Thrash and his partners had spent a small fortune and hit nothing. In trance, the source had assured them there was oil, but they would need to plug the hole with cement at 3,000 feet and, quote, shoot it with a charge of nitroglycerin. For the time being, however, the hole had long been abandoned and would be some time before they could even test Cayce's theory. Despite this, Thrash had become a believer because the reading had accurately detailed the geological description of Desdemona's oil-bearing rock and sand formations, as well as an accurate description of the facilities prior to them being abandoned. So he knew they were accurate. Thrash was so impressed, in fact, he wanted to make a partnership right then and there. Naturally, Khan and Edgar wanted to at least visit the Sam Davis Company in Desdemona before throwing their hat in the ring. Thrash, after all, was not just some rootin' tootin' oil man. He and a handful of his investors in Desdemona practically owned the town of Cleburne, a thriving industrial city of 20,000 people a little west of Dallas. They basically owned or partly owned everything in town, including the bank and the utilities, which were private. All of this in the barrens of northern Texas. It was formerly the Wild West, like just 10 minutes ago. Edgar and Khan were treated like royalty during their visit in July of 1919. They rode in streetcars, and they stayed in a 3-story brick hotel in the heart of the bustling downtown business district. They dined at the fancy hotel restaurant, and they took a tour through the surprisingly modern city in a chaparral touring car. Now, to get out to Desdemona proper, it was an overnight train ride and a jaunt in a buckboard wagon to the nearby boundaries of Bomech, a land of rolling hills and scrub mesquite, elm, and oak. Just beyond Desdemona were oil rigs, giant derricks, pumping stations, collection tanks, and machinery for miles in all 3 directions. Meanwhile, the Sam Davis well was little more than a wooden stake marking the location of a 10-inch drill hole, which had since been capped with cement. So they show up and it's just like a cement hole.
With a dick poking out of it?
Yeah, and look at some of the pictures in the notes. You can see, like, it looks otherworldly. It's just like a city of oil derricks in the middle of nothing.
It's just an abandoned cement hole.
I mean, that's all they have. It's like they're leasing the land and they got this little hole and they've filled it up for now. It's been abandoned. They want to open it back up.
You know what's weird is that even in places like LA during the same era, LA looked the same.
I believe it. You still got some of those around.
When you do, and a lot of them are actually hidden under fake buildings.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can see this depicted very clearly in Eraserhead.
Cool.
Unofficially, it's confirmed that Eraserhead takes place in LA because he filmed it in LA, but it doesn't matter where it takes place. But there are oil rigs and industrial pipes going all everywhere, and it's polluted as alternate reality, I guess, to Los Angeles. Yeah, and this is like when Jack Parsons was doing his thing or coming up, and in this part of the world, it was still like this pioneer, but they had automobiles instead of horses now.
And they were new, and then you got rockets.
Yeah, all out of nowhere. It's kind of insane. Like Los Angeles' history is like this.
You know, you got atomic weaponry, and then electricity is just like 10 minutes ago as well. So their sense of future lust and excitement is at a level that we in 2024 can like hardly imagine. Like our reality has to be 1,000 times as depressing as theirs. You know what I mean? Like you just wouldn't want to get sick back in those days. If you weren't sick,
life was good.
Yeah.
Maybe.
If the sickness and the racism wasn't getting you, I think those were good times. Back in Cleveland, Cayce did a reading for Joseph P. Long, who requested a reading on behalf of the Lucky Boy Oil Company, specifically well number 2, which was starting to look like a dud. After 3,500 feet, no oil had been struck. In trance, Cayce told him to cap it at 3,000, shoot 50 quarts of nitroglycerin, and then he said if they did so, it would produce 600 barrels a day, a hefty amount.
There's 9 billion barrels of oil produced in Los Angeles basin in total since they discovered the oil under Los Angeles.
And you're saying these are hidden under fake buildings, a lot of them?
Yes. The other half of the fake buildings in town are probably human trafficking operations, but working on it. We're investigating it over here on The Whole Rabbit.
Oh, these Diddy jokes are gonna add up. We're putting them in the bank. Collecting interest. Go looking for another type of oil.
Striking that baby oil.
Ooh.
Readings were also performed for Henry Orman, the manager of the Normandy Oil Company of Bowling Green, who, based on Cayce's trance advice, had struck a gusher with oil shooting more than 100 feet above the derrick. Around this time, Cayce also helped Frank Williams, a Nashville businessman, locate phosphate on his property. By November, they had heard back from Joseph Lawn of Lucky Boy Oil. After making a few adjustments based on a follow-up reading, Lucky Boy number 2 struck a geyser of crude oil, which, as prophesied, gave exactly 600 barrels of crude a day. So, now that Cayce had done readings for other people, and they had struck it big, of course, Edgar Cayce was all in the newspaper. They're like, this guy knows where the oil is. And Khan was stoked. He was like,
no one in the world can stop us now. I added the laugh, but that's essentially what he said.
And so, with some strikes under their belt, they're like, okay, we're gonna go and be oilmen now. Now, really though, it was Khan who bought into the Sam Davis Company. In fact, he took the position as managing director and vice president, so pretty important. Certain of their success, the partnership brought the best rotary equipment money could buy, along with all the necessary supplies to accomplish the drill. This, and clearing the current well of debris, proved to be extremely costly. Furthermore, there was the task of hiring a skilled driller to operate the machinery. In trance, Cayce told the pair to seek out a man named Cecil Ringle in a small Texas cattle town called Strawn. The source even provided Khan with the exact hotel room number where Ringle and his family could be found. When Ringle opened the door, he was a bit shocked to find 2 army officers and a psychic standing at his door, requesting him by name and profession, no less. It's like some Men in Black situation going on. Khan had managed to keep his commission with the military, and had even obtained a year-long assignment to tour Texas and the southern states to report to his superiors on the quickly growing oil industry. Seriously. I mean, it must have been of strategic importance, because prior to World War I, the United States had mostly just been an agrarian nation. And now, on the heels of yet another war, it was becoming rapidly industrialized, and the demand for oil was like astronomical, and it was just continuing to grow. So it does kind of make sense. But I do find it interesting that this entire period of time, it's like Khan is legit on a military mission, on a surveillance intelligence mission.
It's the Texas tea.
It is.
Exploded just like tea.
So why did they have that other military guy with them? Well, Khan had recruited the help of Edwin Wilson Major. He was also a fellow officer, and he was like an aide to the mission. Edwin's last name, in fact, Wilson, was because he was directly related to the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, the same one who was getting the readings from Cayce. So, I mean, just put 2 and 3 and 4 together. Like, they're on a mission from the U.S. government to get the information on what the hell is going on in northern Texas in the oil industry. So, of course, Ringle was confounded. The family he had stopped just there for a couple days to rest on their journey from Illinois. It It had been an unplanned stop. His wife had written letters to inform their family of where they were staying, but they hadn't even been sent yet. Con practically pushed his way in the door, and he made a real show of it, having Cayce perform a reading to demonstrate his ability. By the end of their visit, they had procured the help of the entire Ringel family, many of whom worked in various roles on site, including Miss Ringel, who prepped the meals for the camp. It was like his whole family was like drillers. It's like, oh, my son is a driller, and my dad is a driller. I seriously can't believe this isn't a Netflix special. Imagine how creepy that would have been for the Ringel family. Government psychics just pushing his way into your hotel room. It's like, I knew you would be here. Excuse me? Phones don't even exist yet. How did you know I was here? Now, the stranger part of the story is that Edgar and Con, unlike their partners in Cleburne, decided to stay at the site where the oil was actually being pumped. They would participate in all the backbreaking labor, presumably to oversee the operations and ensure its success. Ragtown, as it was called, was just a quarter-mile of old metal shacks and tents where workers stayed along and ate together in a giant mess hall that catered to the couple hundred drillers who lived there full-time. Dingy, manly place. Of course, the culture in Ragtown was very Wild West. There were lease brokers and bank tellers and saloon keepers and gamblers and prostitutes and pimps and drunks and bandits, thieves and hold-up men. On site, Edgar was just one of the workers, though. He slept on a cot, he used an outhouse, and he cleaned his oil-stained clothes in big soapy vats. During the day, Edgar could be counted on to chop wood for the steam engine or work on constructing the derricks. And then after work, when all the others were out drinking and cavorting at the saloon, Edgar would just stay at camp and read his Bible and sometimes take long contemplative walks along the waterway on Hog Creek, just how Nikola Tesla would. Edgar would only go into Common for supplies or a haircut, but he would attend con to the local dance hall. But he absolutely abstained from dancing out of respect for Gertrude.
You know, that's
Aw.
cool.
He was very faithful. And strangely, Edgar did not stick out in a bad way. The residents and workers of Ragtown were remarkably tolerant towards Edgar Cayce's freaky side. He did work damn hard after all. It was probably clear to everyone that he came from farmer stock, and there were such thing as oil smellers and oil witches. They were not as uncommon as you'd think. I mean, it just meant Cayce was not the first psychic in town to help guide operations. This was just part of the lifestyle, apparently.
It sounds a lot like water dowsing.
Yeah, like there's even one Texas minister who claimed to have x-ray eyes where he could see oceans of oil flowing deep below the surface.
Sounds like a Diddy party.
Now, Cayce was once approached on the street by a cowboy with spurs on his boots and a six-shooter. He just walked up and asked him out of nowhere, "When's it gonna rain? You're the guy who knows everything." Apparently, all Edgar did was he felt this feeling and he looked up at the sky and he said, "Friday, 4 p.m." Turned out to be eerily accurate.
Nice.
This sounds like a Red Dead Redemption 2 side mission now.
I'm looking for Edgar Cayce now. I'm sure he's in the game. Everyone else we talk about is.
Just like you walk up to somebody in the bar. It's like, hey, brother. You know, Arthur Morgan. You know what's going to rain?
Friday, 4 p.m.
Hey, I need you to go kill some people.
Always that. Edgar did spend his days going back and forth between Alabama and Texas, managing the photo studio at home and then tending to work in Ragtown. When Hughlin turned 13, he got to go with Dad and see what cowboy life was all about. Hughlin took to it pretty quickly, too. When you grow up in the deep South with a freaky psychic father, you know, you get pretty damn good at scrapping. And Hughlin had pretty much perfected it, just like Grandpa Leslie.
I like Leslie.
Now in Ragtown, Hughlin got to see a whole different side of his dad. Edgar Cayce would ride barely broken horses, he'd dig trenches, he'd work the rig, and then he'd sit around at night telling campfire stories. You know, like a real man. And of course, Edgar was purportedly very good at poker. He was often accused of cheating by reading people's minds.
Oh, you know, this whole Industrial Illusions Yu-Gi-Oh company with Maximilian Pegasus knowing how to read cards with his Millennium Egyptian artifact in his eyeball. Just checking all the boxes off here. You know, it sounds a lot like Edgar Cayce, and Maximilian Pegasus might be the same person.
Now, when the well failed to produce right away, tensions rose, and things began to get desperate around camp. One day, a cable snapped and sent a flurry of tools down the well. Costly disaster that potentially could cost a fortune to fix. Hughlin said he almost witnessed one worker nearly get shot over suspicion of being in league with the competition and purposefully sabotaging the rig. Thankfully, Ringel was able to retrieve the tools with his grappling hook, but delays like this became commonplace.
Grappling hook?
Yes! Ringel
Goddamn.
is a pro with the grappling hook. So in a letter back home, little Hughlin summarized the entire situation eloquently.
There's nothing wrong with Dad, but I think there's something wrong with everybody else. They all want to drill wells and make lots of money. They think everybody else is crooked. They are afraid of Dad because they think he can go to sleep and tell Dave and the others where the oil is coming in. I think somebody or some people are trying to keep the well from being drilled. It's all a mess.
even little Hugh Lynn is suspicious. Before long, suspicion had switched to Khan, who Thrash had come to suspect was stalling progress until the leases were up so he could start his own company and drill there instead. A trance reading, in fact, was needed to exonerate Khan, and it reassured the team that oil was down there, but greedy, turbulent minds were likely to bungle the operation. This is precisely what happened. For starters, Ringo became convinced that Khan was banging his wife, and he pulled a gun on him at camp over it. At this point, Khan and Edgar had enough and decided to pull out of the operation. Then one fateful day, Ringo happened upon some very promising samples, which kept him at the job site late into the night. He was sure to strike it big by morning. That night, Thrash arrived at Ringel's home, who convinced Leona Ringel, his wife, that he required a copy of the drilling contract so he could pay Cecil his big share. Leona was like, okay, and then she obliged and gave him a copy of the contract. This was not a good idea. When the contract came back, the front page had been replaced, and Cecil's percentage had been replaced by a daily rate. Cecil was furious. He was so mad. He pulled the gun on Thrash when he found out.
So instead of being a co-profiter, he was basically being paid as an employee.
Yeah, his whole family was promised, like 20%, and then the night he's gonna strike it big, the big boss goes to his wife and is like, I need a copy of the contract. I have to pay you guys, so I left my copy in another state somewhere, and I'll be right back with it. I promise I'm not going to change it. And when he comes back, it's like, I'm going to pay you $20 a day, good boy. And it's like, oh, God damn it!
Brutal.
And so
Man.
Ringel points a gun at his head, and Leona just begs him to not shoot him. And of course, afterwards, the Ringels have to pack their bags in a rush and get the hell out of town because they just pulled the gun on the guy who owns the town.
Yeah, they did something illegal,
Yeah, like you're just a driller.
Oh no, the town driller's gone. Yeah, that's fine. Nobody needed that driller.
And so this ended the Cayce and Khan partnership with the Sam Davis Company. But believing that riches were just around the corner, the pair was not ready to give up their dreams of striking black gold and was ready to give it another try. But if you'd like to hear that section of the show about the Cayce Oil Petroleum Company, Cayce's run-in with skeptics, including the great Harry Houdini, at one time that the elites almost convinced Cayce to sell his soul, and the details of a very interesting back and forth with a fellow who was studying theosophy at the time and got his hands on Edgar Cayce's trance state and started asking him the important questions that we would like to know the answer to, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you this extended episode, it'll get you all the extended Edgar Cayce episodes and all the rest of the extended episodes too, which are pretty okay if you ask me. Some people say it's like reading a book, but with your ears, and I'm okay with that.
That's kind of insane because that means you have eyeballs in your ears.
Like in Beetlejuice.
Maybe you got eardrums in your eye holes. How does that feel?
Feels like hip hop. Feels like Funky Worm.
In the year 3000.
I like hearing sights and seeing sound.
Now, I'm going to try and wrap up the Edgar Cayce story. I really am trying. I was going to skip stuff, but how could I skip him getting into the oil business? At some point, we're going to talk about his prophecies, right? And in the extended show, we're going to talk about some of the philosophy that the source wants us to explore.
And probably some of my 2 cents and some closing statements from me about all of it.
We'll finish it eventually. Thank you for supporting your local or internet art. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew pew.